Annette Simmons loves what she does. Oh my God, how cool is that? So far, she's written 4 books that have been translated into 11 languages. She has over 30 years of study and experience helping others by designing and delivering tools and training that improve the flow of stories. And probably her major claim to fame is she turned me on to the drive-by truckers. You know what I mean? And my life was completely changed. Anyway, Annette, always good to see you. I love talking to you, and we've done a lot of good work before. How's it going? How you holding up?
I am so fortunate and grateful. We are, I live in Raleigh, and I spent yesterday planting zinnias. And, I can look out on my tomato plants. And if it wasn't for, digging in the dirt, I'm not sure how I'd be doing. But I'm really fortunate, and so very grateful to be able to. And also, it's just the interesting thing about there's so many Zoom meetings, as everybody knows. But I've been a bunch of storyteller consultants have been getting together to have Zoom meetings, which I don't think we would do if it wasn't, for this situation. And it's just such a rich environment to talk about how storytelling does can help us cope in a crisis.
Well, let's just jump into that. That's actually my first question to you is can you talk briefly about uh, talk to us about the powerful role that stories play in times of crisis in general?
Well, there's a lot of people who are talking about what's my news story, what's the news story. And in human history, there are no news stories, right? There are stories that work and that, help us live better together, and then we forget them. And then we have to remember them again. And I think what happened with the impact of digital reasoning, if you will, because what happens is that when we ask for computers to think for us or to
Hmm.
learn for us, they it's a disembodied learning.
Hmm.
And we forget things like how to take care of our own feelings and how to take care of the feelings of others, and the survival value of empathy.
Hmm.
Collective survival is humans are social animals. We have to have these bonds, or else things fall apart.
Hmm.
And things are falling apart right now.
Right.
And so for me, the storytelling that is most important is finding the things that don't change,
Right.
or maybe some of the stories that we forgot
Hmm.
in the process of chasing market share. Or my pet peeve is a lot of people think storytelling is finding out what the audience wants you to be and then telling them that's who you are.
Okay. Right.
I look at there's an episode in the Julia Roberts movie where with Richard Gere, A
Hmm.
Pretty Woman,
Hmm.
where he asks, "What's your name?" and she's like, "What do you want it to be?"
Exactly.
And I think so
Right.
many people have done that, and they didn't realize that they were abandoning themselves.
I I don't mean to interrupt here. We've only got a certain amount of time to keep this LinkedIn friendly here. Can you offer maybe a little bit of advice or maybe some hints for people who want to flex their storytelling muscles now while we're sort of in the middle of this thing?
I think there's two things. One is it's always good to try to so you can figure out what your market segment is, but that's
Hmm.
again that's trying to find out who the audience wants you to be.
Hmm.
And that's the reasoning of becoming what they want you to be is hidden in this term, analyzing your audience.
Sure.
That means you're separate from your audience.
Right.
Let me turn off that beep. Um, and when you're separate from your audience, then they can feel it.
Right.
And so, who I am stories, I always start people off with a who I am story. And I think it's time to revisit your who I am story,
Good.
and to not start chasing what you think who you should be, because humans have a universal appreciation for people who are trustworthy. And being trustworthy is a function most of the time of denying yourself the opportunity to exploit,
Hmm.
or of going the extra mile, even in a situation where it would have made business sense
Sure.
in the short term. And so when we come up where for listeners, you all have a story about a time when it cost you to be trustworthy,
Sure.
or a time when you weren't trustworthy and you regretted it forever. And I think revisiting these stories is a good way to find our grounding
Good.
of
Good.
who we actually are,
Good.
and then move with that grounding into, so what does that look like in this new environment?
Got it. And just to wrap up, the thematic question I ask everybody who is so kind to sit in front of a camera and have to deal with me is, Annette, what lessons are we learning now that we must never forget?
I think the biggest lesson is the different ways that female narratives frame the response to the crisis opposed to male narratives. And I'm talking about the toxic, male sort of me, very small circle of moral concern, only our tribe. And what we see is the female leaders who are illustrating a large circle of moral concern, increased empathy. And what I've been discovering, because I've been doing research, I've been writing this book about female narratives about power for about 10 years, and lo and behold, it's useful now, is that women get characterized as being weak because we avoid harm. And that gets labeled risk aversion. But the truth is that collective survival is, if we don't avoid harm, we end up in the situation where we're at right now. Right. And so for me, the biggest lesson is how these female narratives are coming in and proving useful and resilience that the toxic male narratives don't.
That's excellent. You strike me as being an optimist. Are you feeling pretty okay about how this is all going to come out in the end?
I think we're in for 3 years of disruption. I think the economic hardships are going to be horrific, but I believe in people.
Right.
And I've always had faith in the goodness of people. And so if I'm an optimist, I believe that we will rise to the occasion.
All right. So good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. You take
All right.
you take care.
Okay, thank you.